There are many situations where you have to disagree with someone, talk about your opinion. When was the last time you disagreed with someone? When was the last time you had to share your opinion on something? In today's video, I want to give you phrases that you can use instead of saying I think. How you can talk about your opinion on something either in a more professional way, a more academic way, or if you are doing the IELTS exam, how you can talk about your opinion without saying, I think. I think is very basic English. It's one of the first sentences we learn. We learn I like, I feel, I want, I think. So let's look at some more advanced ways to share your opinion or speak up about an idea, a project, a situation. The first part of this video, I'm going to give you professional ways to say I think. So how you can bring up your opinion in a meeting with your colleagues, with your boss, with clients, in an interview. Then we're going to look at academic ways to say I think. Academic English is for situations like studying, university, learning something abroad in a country that uses English as their spoken language. And finally, we will look at IELTS examples of how you can say I think in an IELTS exam without repeating I think, or my opinion is. Now, all of these ways that I'm going to give you today can be used in any situation, really. If you want to bring up your opinion, disagree with someone, raise a topic or a subject, you can use any of the examples I'm going to give you. It doesn't always have to be professional English in the workplace, academic English at university, IELTS English in the IELTS exam. If I give you a phrase today and you feel, oh, I like that phrase, that's something I can use often, you absolutely can. But I've split it into 3 parts to make it very easy no matter what you are learning English for. If you're learning English for work, you have the professional section. If you're learning English to study abroad, you have the academic English section. And if you are just learning general English for the IELTS exam, you have the IELTS section. So let's get started today. Grab a pen and paper so you can write down some of these expressions if they feel like something you would say. In a professional situation, it's always a good idea to be polite and what we would call soften what you want to say. So instead of directly saying, I think this, or I want to do this, you find a softer way to say it. Do you think perhaps, and then whatever it is, do you think perhaps we should try a different tactic? Do you think perhaps the campaign didn't work because we didn't put enough effort in? By saying, do you think perhaps, and phrasing it as a question, it's less accusational. You're not blaming someone else. I think you didn't do this. You're raising it as a question, as a discussion, so we can discuss. Have we tried to? Now, again, this is softening it. Instead of saying, did you try this? Or I think you should have tried this. Have we, as a collective team, as a group of people working for the same company, the same goal, the same reason, have we tried to do something? Have we tried to contact the client? Have we tried to lower prices? Have we tried to find a new delivery company? It might not be your responsibility, but by saying we, it puts you all in the situation together. It's inclusive and it's less accusational. Have you and your team tried to do this? Have we done this? Have we thought about? Have we tried to do this? Could I make a suggestion? And then, of course, you would go on to give your suggestion. Could I make a suggestion? Can we lower prices and keep the quality the same? Could I make a suggestion? Can we split the team in two? Or could I make a suggestion? We split the team into two. One works on product and one works on sales. Again, by asking, could I make a suggestion? It's like you're asking for permission, but it's less direct. Instead of saying, we need to do this, I think we should do this, you're saying, here's my suggestion. You can accept it if you want. It's more polite, it's softer. Now, sometimes we have to disagree with people in the workplace because they've said something wrong or it's not their area of expertise, so they maybe don't have the same understanding as you do. Instead of saying, I think you're wrong, or I think you've calculated that incorrectly, we can say, with respect, that's not quite correct. With respect, that's not quite correct. And then you would go on to correct it or give the correct information. With respect, that's not quite correct. Our sales last year were actually 25% up. Instead of just correcting the person or saying, I think you're wrong, you're showing respect and you're just correcting them where you need to. Now, often when you're in a professional meeting, discussion, negotiation, you have information that you're working from, that you're analyzing and you're working from. So in this case, we could say, from the information we have, I understand that, or I believe that, or I can see that. From the information we have, I can see that it didn't work in the way that we thought it would. Perhaps we can try this next time. From the information that we have, it looks like your team didn't perform as well as they should have. So again, instead of I think your team didn't perform well, it's the information that's in front of me tells me this outcome. Now, if that's wrong, then perhaps the information is wrong and you can correct me. One possibility could be, so rather than I think, one possibility we have that we have access to that we can try is, one possibility could be we hire more people to help the team when it's a busy period. I think we need to hire more people. It's very much my opinion, and someone could easily say, oh, well, you think wrong. Whereas if I say one possibility could be, then it opens the room for discussion about the possibility of hiring more people, the pros and the cons of hiring more people. It is worth considering that. So perhaps the discussion is going on and people are bringing up lots of important and different points, but they've missed something. Instead of saying, I think that you missed something, or I think you're not looking at the right information, I think you're going off topic, it is worth considering that something. It is worth considering that the budget is only X amount, and what you're talking about is a lot higher than the budget. It is worth considering that hiring more people could mean our team feels like they're not doing a good enough job. It's a way to bring up something that perhaps hasn't been brought up by anyone else. And finally, for the professional section, that might be difficult to achieve, to do, because. So if someone has raised a topic, raised an idea, raised a solution, and you know it's not going to work, instead of just immediately saying, that won't work because, what we can say instead is, that could be difficult because. So that idea, rather than your idea is wrong, that idea you've suggested sounds good, but it could be difficult because of these aspects, the budget, the people, the technicalities of it. So again, there's no blame on anyone else. We're softening it. That idea is fantastic, but it could be difficult because. Now let's move on to academic English. Academic English requires less of a personal opinion and more of an analytical response to information, data. Think about if you're not at university at the moment, think about when you were in school, when you were at university and you had to write essays. It was never, I think that. It was always, this happened and this was the result. And some people think this. In conclusion, this, right? It's always, this is the evidence we have. This is what we can interpret the evidence as. It's less about your personal opinion. Oh, my camera just disappeared for a second there. So it's less about your personal opinion and more about what the information shows us. It could be argued that, so rather than I think, or I will argue that, it could be argued that. This is to bring up an opposing opinion. So, global warming is causing problems worldwide. However, it could be argued that the Earth has been warming up for the past 6,000 years. That was just an example off the top of my head. But it's to raise an opposing opinion. The state of America at the moment is not a positive thing. However, it could be argued that the American economy will benefit from this situation. It is reasonable to suggest that. So again, I'm not saying I think this is the outcome or in my opinion, but based on the information we have or we've discussed, it is reasonable to suggest that some people believe this, or someone might have this opinion, or this might be the outcome. And similarly, there is a strong case for. So again, you have the information, you have the findings, the documentation, the analysis, and because of these findings, these results, this analysis, there is a strong case for. A lot of people in America will struggle through this period of time. But there is also a strong case that many people in America, maybe the top 1%, will really benefit from this time. It appears that. So again, this is looking at the information and what it is showing. However, it's not as solid, not as definite as there is a strong case for. It appears that, it's like, this is what we see. It appears that English is a very important language at the moment. It appears that. I don't have solid evidence, but based on what we can see, this could be something that we should consider. Evidence suggests, or data suggests, that. So again, it's not my opinion, but the evidence we've looked at, the information we've collected shows or suggests. One possible interpretation is, now I like this one a lot because it's not saying I'm interpreting it this way, and it's not saying this is the only way to interpret it. What it's saying is one way we could interpret it. And of course, there are thousands of ways you can interpret anything. So one possible interpretation is, a closer examination reveals that. So perhaps in your answer, you have given information, and this is the general outcome or analysis of that information, but a closer examination to this information reveals that. So not I think, not my opinion from this information, but from examining this information, this is what it shows. And finally, according to the findings, this is very nice. According to the findings, according to the data, according to the information, the discussion, the research, the experiments, this is the outcome. Again, it's not an opinion, it's just what we see based on what we have looked at. And finally, your I think synonyms for the IELTS exam. Now, you don't need to use such advanced academic or professional sentences in the IELTS exam, but you do need to show an understanding of the English language. So having alternative phrases to I think will help you demonstrate this. And the IELTS exam is the closest thing to a natural conversation you will have. It's not academic, it's not professional, it's a natural general conversation. So all of these can be used in discussions with friends, colleagues, family members. They're not only for the IELTS exam, of course. In my view, instead of I think, in my view. So again, just to reiterate, to reconfirm what I've said before, academic English we avoid, in my opinion. Professional English, business English, we can say, in my opinion, but to make it more polite, softer, easier for the communication to flow, we use more inclusive language like we, or the information shows us. Or could we perhaps do? Because if I say I think, in my opinion, it's very much I'm not taking on other people's feedback, which of course we all know, teamwork, you have to work together. But in the IELTS exam, you can absolutely talk about, in my opinion. In fact, most of the questions they will ask involve something like, in your opinion, what something something. So in my view, it's just another way to say I think. I think this, in my view, this. From my perspective, just a nicer way to say in my opinion. From my perspective, your perspective is how you see something. And of course, everyone's perspective is different because everyone lives a different life. I would argue that. Now, this is, of course, when you want to counter something, you want to argue against something. So you wouldn't start your answer with this, I would argue that, especially if the question was, in your opinion. But let's say, for example, the question is phrased as, global warming is not true. Or, the man landing on the moon was faked, it wasn't a real event. I would argue that. And whatever your opinion is, because immediately you're counteracting the information you've been given. So if you agree with me, you can't start your answer, I would argue that. But definitely if you want to bring up something that is opposing, opposite, against what I'm saying, then yes, I would argue that. I am of the opinion that. So instead of in my opinion, I am of the opinion that. I am inclined to believe that. So this isn't as strong as I believe that, because I believe that it's 100%. There's no changing my mind. I believe this. But I am inclined to believe this or that is from the information I have. This is my belief. However, if you give me different information, maybe my belief will change. Maybe I'm at 90%, but you could tell me something that brings me down to 80%. Personally speaking, this can be used in any situation, and it's a very nice way to give your opinion, but identify that yes, it is my opinion, it's not a fact, it's not truth, it's just my opinion. And it's quite nice if it's a topic you're not actually 100% sure on. Personally speaking, I don't have that experience, so my opinion would be different to yours. There is no doubt in my mind that. Now, this, as it suggests, there is no doubt here. You believe this 100%. There is no doubt in my mind that teachers need to be paid more. There is no doubt in my mind that doctors and nurses need more care in the workplace. They work long hours and they don't get enough downtime, free time. There is no doubt in my mind that English food is not the tastiest food in the world. There's no doubt there. I 100% believe this, have this opinion. And finally, while it is true that, I personally believe that. So while it is true that English food does not have a lot of flavour, I personally believe that it is filling and it's easy to eat. You know, it's two contradicting ideas. While this is true, I believe this. While it is true that there are many English teachers, on YouTube, I personally believe that you need to study with someone you actually like in order to remember the words and phrases. Or, while it is true that English is the most widely spoken language in the world, I personally believe that it's just as important to speak Spanish, German, Chinese, Japanese, a second language, a third language, a fourth language. So, I hope that was helpful today. You can make some examples in the comments if you would like to. As I said, I have split this into 3 sections because I teach all 3 sections. I teach business English, I teach academic English, and I teach IELTS preparation. However, you can mix and match these in any situation you want. There's nothing wrong with using more advanced English in the workplace or using more academic English in your IELTS exam. There's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure that the sentence is grammatically correct, the sentence structure is right, and you're using it in the right context. Thank you everyone for watching today. Please like the video and share with a friend. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Have a good day. Bye bye.